Thank you all again for attending the 2020 annual meeting at the ACLU of Colorado. We're so happy to have all of you for our first virtual meeting. My name is Delana Maines and I'm the Director of Campaigns here at the ACLU of Colorado. We want to start tonight with just a little video. And we'll get that going for you and then we'll start the program.
We exist upon the shoulders of those who have done great things before us. The shoulders of Black, Brown, and Indigenous Americans, the shoulders of femmes and queers, those who demanded a greater society. There is, however, unfinished business, so we continue to fight. We fight for bodily autonomy, to use public spaces in dignity, to navigate the world in a body truly, wholly our own. We fight to love, to affirm our own humanity along with the humanity of the ones we love. We fight for the freedom to build community and networks of mutual trust, to organize, assemble, act against violence, to collectively shout, "We will not be erased." That is why we fight.
Great, that's a wonderful video. Just a few things about the webinar. If you're a attendee tonight, you're completely muted. We can't see you. So don't worry if there's construction above you like is happening to me right now. And if you have questions for us, for our panelists later in the program, we will be doing a Q&A. Please put them in the Q&A box. Usually it's at the bottom of your screen. If you're on a different type of computer than me, it could be somewhere else, so just look around for it. So it is my great pleasure to introduce to you our Interim Executive Director, Stephen Meswar.
Thank you, Delana. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. As Delana said, I'm Stephen Meswar. I am the Interim Executive Director of the ACLU of Colorado. I have been, my pronouns are he, him, his. I have been Interim Executive Director since April 1st of this year, and I have been the Deputy Director since late 2012. Thank you for joining us for our first ever virtual annual meeting. We've never done a virtual annual meeting before, and so please be patient with us if there are some technical glitches or some rough transitions or whatnot. But we are really appreciative that everyone is here with us tonight. I want to start out with a few thanks. First of all, I do want to thank a couple of people who are responsible for pulling this together, in particular, Delana Maines, who you just met, our Director of Campaigns, who really took the reins and figured out how we could do an annual meeting virtually and figured it out and shepherded all of us through it. And so I want to give a big shout out to Delana. In particular, and also I want to shout out to Julian Camera, our field organizer, who put this PowerPoint together that you'll see tonight and is sort of pulling the levers behind the scenes on the technology. So thanks to Delana and Julian for really pulling this together. I also wanted to do a big thanks to our board of directors. I know there are a number of our board are present tonight. I can't actually see you, but thank you for being here. And in particular, I would like to recognize Maurice Scott, Scotty Scott, who is our board chair since we both took over at the same time, April 1st, who has shown incredible leadership this year and been a great partner to me in sort of guiding this organization through this pretty crazy time we're in. So those are some quick thanks I want to extend. And of course, I want to thank all of my colleagues, my staff who are here and presenting tonight, and our awardees who are also here. So thank you. I'm just going to share a few brief sort of overview thoughts about sort of the year that we're in, and then we're going to move on to some annual awards that we present, and then we're going to move to some updates on our work, and then finally at the end we will have time for question and answer. So you know, we knew 2020 was going to be an intense year. 2020 is the 100th anniversary of the ACLU. It's our centennial year. There's a monumental, as you probably know, monumentally important presidential election happening. So we knew going into it that it would be a lot, and we had no idea, of course, that we would face a global pandemic, among other things. And so all of our work has continued and intensified, and we have truly never been busier. The ACLU of Colorado staff has been working from home since mid-March. I think like all of you, we thought that might be a temporary situation. It has turned into something that is semi-permanent. We have closed the office indefinitely at this point. But we have also found that we're remarkably productive working from home, though it's obviously a huge change, but we're doing pretty well. When the pandemic hit, we immediately turned our focus to issues of decarceration. As of course all of you are aware, prisons, jails, immigrant detention facilities are hotbeds of COVID infection, not only within the facilities, but in the staff and the personnel that go in and out of the facilities. So they're breeding grounds, but then people who work in facilities then take them back to their communities. So we turned a big focus on decarceration, trying to get people out of jails, prisons, and immigrant detention facilities. That included advocacy with the governor, district attorneys, sheriffs, and 2 lawsuits, one against the Weld County Sheriff and one against the Colorado Department of Corrections itself. Those cases are both ongoing at this point. And then, of course, the George Floyd murder by police in Minneapolis happened, and there was this explosion of protests all across the country against police brutality and in support of Black lives. And of course, in the wake of those, of course, those protests not only were in protest of extreme police brutality, but featured extreme police brutality. And in Denver and Aurora, we experienced a tremendous amount of police violence against protesters, and we filed a lawsuit against the Denver police for violence against protesters. So all of that work, of course, I'm just hitting some high points. All of that work continues. But now, of course, we are really shifting our focus to this fall and this election season. We are involved in several ballot initiatives, and in particular, I want to highlight the fight to defeat Proposition 115, which is an abortion ban for later in pregnancy. And of course, we are doing a very robust work to educate voters on a number of issues and get out the vote. Most of these things you will hear a lot more about, so I'm just touching some high points, and I'll turn it over to my colleagues to really fill in some details. But as you'll hear tonight, what I want to sort of let all of our members and supporters know is like our plate is more full than it has ever been. And the work of the ACLU has never been more critical. And really it's because of you all, our supporters, our members, our donors. We actually are in a very solid financial and structural position. That's a relief, because when the pandemic hit, there was a lot of concern about what might happen to the organization, and I just wanted to let everyone know that we're in a really solid and strong position, and which is a good thing because we have a huge amount of work to do. So I wanted to say thank you to our members, donors, supporters, volunteers, all of you, for all of the ways that you support us. Your membership, your donations, your volunteer work, your taking action when we ask you to, and just all of the moral and emotional support you send us. We really could not do this without you. And so with that, I am going to turn it now over to some of my colleagues who will present our annual Volunteer of the Year and Civil Rights in Action Awards. So please welcome Jen Simano, Jessica Howard, and Helen Griffiths.
Jen?
Jen, we're having trouble hearing you.
Jen. All right, well, this is our first little glitch of the night. Give us 1 second here. Try this again.
Are we good to go? I don't want to be interrupting another awesome award.
We're good.
All right, well,
Go for it, Jen.
luckily, personally, I apologize to everyone viewing, but I am not perturbed as an organizer. We know how to roll with the punches. So let's move forward with a 2020 Field Volunteer of the Year award. And also, you all can call me biased for sure, but I truly think that ACLU activists and volunteers are the best. They're compassionate, dynamic, tenacious, hungry to learn, and to put that knowledge into action. Our 2020 Volunteer of the Year, Nicole Annan, embodies all of these traits. You know, it's no secret that we are an extremely busy office, and perhaps uniquely so these past couple of years. Yet back when we were in the office, when I would talk about Nicole, my colleagues would go, "Oh, Nicole, the one who shows up to everything." And that's just the point. Activism and advocacy are about showing up. And so I invite you to even close your eyes and imagine all of the civil liberties emergencies that we've faced these past couple of years alone. Then imagine all of the advocacy work ACLU has done. Nicole has been there for all of it. I'm talking rallies, text banks, marches, protests, setting up and breaking down events with us, phone banks, lobby days, knocking on doors, letters to the editors, writing postcards, finding stories, coming to press conferences, forums, demonstrations. And Nicole doesn't just show up for one issue, she shows up for all of them. And did I mention all the lobbying, phone banking, and door knocking? Because that is a ton of talking to strangers on behalf of civil liberties and civil rights. It's remarkable. Nicole, on a personal note, you've really come to be a sidekick to me, and I'm so grateful not only for your fierceness, but your kindness, your calmness, and to be frank, your lack of judgment, as you've seen me in many stressful states. But really, thank you for your service to our organization's mission and for being such an important part of our advocacy team on behalf of ACLU of Colorado. It is our pleasure to virtually award you the 2020 Field Volunteer of the Year. Let me see how this works with my broken internet. This is the award. There we go.
Hi, everyone, and thanks so much, Jen. As Jen said in her kind introduction, I'm Nicole, pronouns she, her. I'd love to see you all in person, but instead I'm coming to you live from West Virginia in my former childhood bedroom, turned into my dad's home office. I moved to Colorado in 2017, and I started volunteering with ACLU in 2018. And my interest in ACLU began around the time I moved to Colorado. As a former immigration advocate, I was so upset and horrified about what was happening to our immigrant neighbors that I felt I'd explode if I didn't channel those feelings into something useful. Enter ACLU. I reached out and was immediately directed to Jen Simano, who got me involved right away. And after that first event, which I think was tabling at a demonstration against family separation, I knew I'd found my people. So I started spending a lot of time at the ACLU offices, as Jen said, writing postcards, phone banking, text banking, and eating so much sexy pizza, I probably gained 10 pounds just from ACLU events alone. Anybody who's been to the ACLU office for events knows they're kind of a fixture for our snacks in the evening. And anyway, ACLU of Colorado has vast opportunities to get involved across a whole spectrum of issues that are important to me and so many Coloradans. For example, the annual lobby day at the state capitol, where we can speak with lawmakers about key legislation, and then also this year's new Court Watch program, where volunteers can observe court proceedings and criminal court and record data, and to kind of promote transparency and ensure that rights are being upheld by the courts. ACLU's broad and nonpartisan activism was just the perfect fit for me, and the group just does so much. When it comes to championing racial justice and LGBTQ equality and defending reproductive freedom, ACLU is on it. When it comes to educating voters and getting out the vote come election season, ACLU is on that too. When it comes to holding government accountable, no matter which party is in office, ACLU is on it. They're always fighting the good fight. And no matter what happens in 2020 in Colorado or nationwide, we're gonna need to fight. Colorado is a prime example of what can be accomplished when we don't let ourselves get complacent just because a certain party's in control. What happens when we not only refuse to give up, but push harder. Just this past year, we repealed the death penalty here in Colorado, and we passed landmark legislation to hold our police accountable, and even ended qualified immunity, which is like beyond hard to do. So I know no matter who is in office, ACLU will continue to fight for these issues. And when I'm fighting with ACLU, I know I'm on the right side. And so I just wanted to thank the whole ACLU team for always being at the forefront of these issues, and for organizing all of us fired up Coloradans so that we can actually affect positive change and use our energy for good. And I particularly like to thank Jen Simano, Delana Maines, and Julian Camera for their amazing organizing, educating, and coordinating. And then I'd just like to close by encouraging everyone to keep up the fight and check out all the opportunities ACLU has to stay involved during the pandemic via Zoom webinar, panels, text banks, phone banks, so that we can keep fighting the good fight from home. Thanks so much.
Cheers to that. Thank you so much, Nicole. I'll pass this over for our next award to Jess. Thanks again.
Hello, thank you, Jen. Good evening, everyone. Our second Volunteer of the Year award is being given to Miss Cheryl Ellison. Cheryl came to our organization last October when her family temporarily relocated to Colorado from Canada while her husband was on work assignment. While Cheryl could not practice law as an attorney in the US during this time, this did not dissuade her from using her skills to reach out to the ACLU to volunteer in any capacity she could. At the time, I was working through all of our Know Your Rights materials and providing presentations to engage students in the ACLU's work of championing free speech in schools and needing very much to update our student handbook. Cheryl's upbeat willingness to crack open the law books to review and update our handbook's language, such as no longer using MySpace as a case example, because what high school student knows today what a MySpace page even is, but also adding new topics such as cyberbullying and resources students and parents could access under Colorado law. Due to Cheryl's work, our affiliate not only has the capacity to update our handbook, but other outreach materials such as presentation slides, one-page handouts, and eventually our webpage. But in addition to using her lawyering skills, Cheryl was willing to pitch a hand in other advocacy work, including even cutting out our postcards, with a slight mishap with cutting her finger, but don't worry, she and her finger survived. So although the pandemic has cut our time with Cheryl short as she and her family make their way back to Canada, we could not let her leave without showing our sincere appreciation for her work to help an American organization reach one step closer to fighting for the rights of everyone. So on behalf of the ACLU of Colorado, we are presenting a Volunteer of the Year award to Cheryl Ellison. So thank you so much, Cheryl.
Thank you so much for this. I'm really honored. I did sacrifice my finger a little bit for this. It's better now. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So we moved to Colorado from Toronto this year, and it was supposed to be my year off to not be a lawyer and have a break for a year, but I couldn't, and I really wanted to do something worthwhile with my time. So I'm really grateful that Delana welcomed me and took me in and gave me this opportunity to volunteer at the ACLU. Jessica, I loved working with you so much. Thank you so much for trusting me with this important project that I really knew very little about, but I learned so much in such a short period of time. Thanks to you and everyone else who took the time to help me and answer my questions and teach me about how things work in the US, because it's very different than what I'm used to working for the government in Canada. It was so interesting to see things from the other perspective. It was really inspiring to see how passionate everybody is at the ACLU about their work. And especially in light of everything that has been going on this year. Obviously, I did not expect my whole life to change and everyone else's in March. But you know, it's really made me appreciate how great a need there is for this type of advocacy for civil rights and for change. And I'm just so honored and proud to have been able to even just be such a small part of it. So today is actually my last day in Colorado. I'm sitting here in my empty bedroom on a mattress on the floor. We leave to go back to Canada tomorrow. And thank you so much for making this my last memory of what was otherwise a very strange and sad and just crazy last few months. So I hope everybody continues to stay healthy and safe, and I really hope our paths cross again one day. I would love to help if anybody ever needs anything in Canada. I'm happy to help. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. We truly appreciate you.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll hand it off to Helen.
Hi, my name is Helen. I'm the Public Policy Associate, and I have the honor of presenting the Civil Rights in Action Award. This award goes to the inspirational people who tragically lost loved ones to violence and devoted so much time and energy to repeal. From attending our community events to meeting with legislators, from delivering hundreds of postcards during our End the Death Penalty Lobby Day, to sharing their stories and videos and with the media, from coming to the Capitol year after year, to speaking out during press conferences and testimony. Their strength, vulnerability, honesty, and openness was inspiring, and they each embody the best of humanity. They worked tirelessly to shape a Colorado where redemption, forgiveness, and hope triumphs over retribution, revenge, and violence. I also want to thank Bill Cherner and Dave Sabatos at Coloradans for Alternatives to the Death Penalty, Sarah Kraft at Equal Justice USA, and our team, including Delana, Vanessa, Deanna, Denise, and others, who worked to build a culture of trust and respect and fostered relationships which were at the heart of successful repeal. I know that ending the death penalty would not have been possible without the endless labor of these awardees. It was the honor of a lifetime to work alongside you, and I'm so glad we were able to pass repeal in your name and in memory of your loved ones. I would now like to introduce Charlotta Evans. Charlotta is the Executive Director of 5280 Survivors and the founder of Victim and Offender Mitigation Initiative. She worked to ban life without parole sentences for children, championed a pilot program where felons could meet with victims, and is a leader for juvenile justice and criminal legal reform. Charlotta, I am so happy to give you the Civil Rights in Action Award, and thank you for sharing your thoughts on repeal with us today. Charlotta, if you're here. There, perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Oh, hello there. Thank you. I am Charlotta Evans, and I'm the Executive Director and founder of Victim and Offender Mitigation Initiative. have been active in activism as well as advocacy work for the last 10 years. Due to the loss of my 3-year-old son to the life from the hand of 3 teenagers. That has been my motivation. I'm elated with how things ended. Could not rest at night until I took those steps that were necessary to have my voice heard as a victim family member. I want to thank my Lord Jesus Christ. I want to thank ACLU for this Civil Rights Award. I want to thank you for trusting me with such a controversial and sensitive but necessary assignment. I want to thank everyone for letting me be myself, for knocking on doors and making sure there was an answer on the other side. I truly appreciate it. I want to say thank you to Sarah Kraft at Equal Justice USA. I want to say thank you to Phil Turner, as well as the late Carla Turner. To each victim family member that shed tears, traveled many miles, made sacrifices for the lives of those that they may never meet. Our sons and daughters, our brothers and our sisters, our mothers and our fathers are shining down on each of us, and they are saying, job well done. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Charlotta. I now want to introduce Gail Rice. Gail has worked for criminal legal reform and restorative justice for many years. She played a crucial role in ending the death penalty in Illinois, where she tutored weekly at Chicago's Cook County Jail for 40 years. She flew from Illinois, where she lives, to Colorado several times, including for interviews, a press conference at the Capitol, and hours of testimony. She's a fearless champion for repeal, and I'm honored to award her the Civil Rights in Action Award. Gail, thank you for sharing your thoughts on repeal with us. If you are here.
Yeah. I am here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you great.
I have the video on, but it's not appearing, I guess.
We can see you and hear you perfectly.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, it's great.
Thank you. I'm the sister of Bruce Vanderjagt, the Denver police officer who was killed on November 12th, 1997 by skinhead Matthias Janig. And if Janig had not committed suicide with Bruce's service revolver shortly after the murder, he would certainly have gotten a death penalty sentence in Colorado. 1 year after the murder, I discovered the group Murder Victims' Families for Reconciliation, a death penalty abolition group for victims' family members like myself, and also for family members of those who were on death row or who had family members who had been executed. I opposed the death penalty at that time because 19 years of literacy work and ministry work in jails and prisons had taught me that there was a very different standard of justice for the rich and for the poor. And so I didn't believe that the death penalty could ever be applied properly. Through working with MVFR, Murder Victim Families for Reconciliation, though, I found my opposition to the death penalty deepening far beyond my concerns about fairness in the system. I became very active in Illinois' death penalty repeal, which happened in 2011. It was a real joy for me to help with Colorado's repeal effort, attending the media day, the lobby day, the press conferences, the Senate testimonies, and the community events. The highlight of that work was doing media events for one day with 4 courageous murder victims' family members who all opposed the death penalty. Charlotta was one of them. Listening to each other's stories was inspiring and empowering. Colorado's organizations working together did a wonderful job of highlighting the fact that the death penalty harms rather than heals murder victim family members. And it is so vital that we get that view out, because many people assume that murder victims' family members, of course, support the death penalty. I'd like to take the time to thank all of the wonderful people in Colorado who made me feel so welcome and who taught me so much in the repeal effort. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gail. Really sadly, Delana keeps telling me I am on a schedule, and so not everyone will be able to speak, but thank you, Gail and Charlotta, for sharing some of your thoughts. I now want to award the rest of our Civil Rights in Action Awards. Next, I would like to award Rosemary Harris Lytle. She spent decades advocating for racial equity, criminal legal reform, and the advancement of human rights. Rosemary's devoted countless hours to repealing the death penalty, both professionally as the president of the NAACP of Colorado, Montana, and Wyoming, and personally in memory of her father. We are so grateful for her tireless and continued work on behalf of Colorado's most vulnerable. There are so many causes that we could award her for, and I'm honored to present her with the Civil Rights in Action Award. Thank you, Rosemary, for all you do. Arliss Keller stayed for hours and hours of testimony in the House and Senate. She shared her story in a powerful video, in meeting with legislators, in conversations with ACLU members, in interviews and speeches at the press conference, and so much more. At the end of this exhausting campaign, she asked me to let her know what we were working on next so she could help, which just exemplifies how well-deserved this award truly is. I'm so honored to present her with the Civil Rights in Action Award. Thank you so much, Arliss. Ezra Aldern is the founder of Dance in the Rain Consulting, LLC, which provides mitigation, assessment, and advocacy on behalf of juveniles and young adults involved in the legal system. He's worked tirelessly to end the death penalty and to advocate for a more compassionate and just legal system. Ezra, thank you for all your work at Community Conversations, during testimony at press conferences and on panels. I'm honored to present you with the Civil Rights in Action Award, and I'm so glad I met you. Tim Ricard has worked for years for repeal by sharing his story in videos, at press conferences, in testimony, and with legislators. Tim and his family bring grace, compassion, and goodness to all they do. I also want to acknowledge and thank Jack Benson Jr., Ben and Tim Ricard, Calvin Smith, Joe Benson, and Samantha Benson, all for your work and advocacy. Tim, I'm honored to award you with the Civil Rights in Action Award. Thank you to you and your family. Katie Smith has also spent years advocating for repeal in her mother's memory. She's driven hours to the Capitol in order to testify and shared her story in videos and at the press conference. Thank you for sharing your story and powerfully calling for a more just Colorado. The repeal of the death penalty would not have been possible without the continued support and efforts of the entire Ricard, Smith, and Benson family. Katie, I'm honored to award you with the Civil Rights in Action Award. Thank you so much. Linda Burks Brown believed Colorado would be a better place without the death penalty, and invested hours and hours to make that a reality. The strength and courage she displayed throughout this campaign was inspirational. Thank you for sharing your story and helping us change hearts and minds. I'm honored to present you with the Civil Rights in Action Award. Thank you so much, Linda. I had the pleasure of meeting Alice Randolph at the launch of our campaign to end the death penalty in Aurora. Alice, thank you. I met her at the launch of our campaign to end the death penalty in Aurora. Since then, she's been at countless events, from press conferences to community conversations to hours of interviews. Over and over, she shared one of the worst moments in her life in order to inspire a better future. Alice brought a deep sense of compassion and kindness to everything she did and was a constant force calling for an end to a broken system. I'm so honored to present you with the Civil Rights in Action Award, Alice. Thank you so much for all you did. Last, but certainly not least, is Bob Ottoby. I read Bob's words on the death penalty when I was in college and remember thinking about the strength it would take to survive the unimaginable and then to advocate for years and years just because you know it's the right thing to do. Bob fought for repeal in the Capitol, in the streets, and at the courthouse. He's an inspiring champion for civil liberties, and I am honored to present him with the Civil Rights in Action Award. Thank you so much to all of our awardees for all you have done for Colorado. I know that these awards are just one small way to reflect the deep appreciation, gratitude, and respect of the ACLU of Colorado. Thank you for leading us and inspiring us and championing a better, more hopeful future in all you do. It was an honor to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen and Jessica and Jen, and thank you to all of our awardees. On a personal note, I wanted to say one of the thrills of this year was the repeal of Colorado's death penalty, because I have worked on that for a number of years, and it was a absolute joy and incredible moment to actually have the death penalty repealed in Colorado, and being a part of it, and all of the Civil Rights in Action awardees who were critical to that effort. So thank you all, and thank you to our volunteers of the year who have just been incredible partners with us. So, so congratulations to all. If we were in person, I would encourage us all to do a round of applause. So we'll just do a virtual round of applause to all of our awardees. So, okay. So now we're going to move on, and we're going to do some program updates on all the work that's underway for the ACLU Colorado. And so first up, I would like to introduce our legal director, Mark Silverstein.
Thank you, Stephen. And I've got a comment too about that amazing presentation by Helen and all of the people that work to end the death penalty. When I started as an ACLU staff attorney in California in 1991, I was hired to be the death penalty guy that did litigation. And I tell you, at that time, it was unbelievable to think that something like this repeal could happen by a vote of the legislature. And I think the change that has happened that permits this, I think, can give one faith not only in the ability of society to be changed, but the ability of society to be changed by the hard work of people working and advocating in this kind of a way. All right, I'm going to talk about our legal program. So before I actually talk about our cases, I want to talk about how we are reacting in part to the huge numbers of appointments that Donald Trump has been making to the federal courts. Judges who are unfriendly to most of our issues. I'm going to talk about our efforts to pay more attention to state law and state courts. You know, I'm going to get a little theoretical here too, so bear with me. Over the years, the majority of ACLU lawsuits probably rely on the protections of civil liberties that come from courts' interpretations of the federal Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Due Process Clause, etc. A federal statute, Section 1983, allows persons to sue government actors and government entities for violations of their federal constitutional rights. And when plaintiffs win such a case, a federal statute requires the government to pay the prevailing plaintiff's attorney's fees. That attorney's fee statute provides quite an incentive for civil rights lawyers to pay close attention to the nuances of federal constitutional law. But with more and more Trump judges staffing the federal courts, including the Supreme Court, there is a huge risk that the scope of federal protections of civil liberties is going to be shrinking. And that's one reason, although the federal Constitution gets all the press, we are paying more attention to the state constitution and state law. State constitutional protections aren't well known, but just as the First Amendment protects free expression, the Colorado Constitution has a parallel provision. Just as the Fourth Amendment protects privacy, the state constitution has a parallel provision. And the law requires that the scope of state constitutional protections at a minimum be as broad and strong as the federal Constitution's protection. But here's the bonus. The bonus is that state court judges have the power and they have the authority to rule that the state constitution protects civil liberties more broadly, more expansively than the federal Constitution. Colorado courts have this authority. and they have sometimes exercised it, but not often enough. For example, Colorado courts hold that the state constitution protects free expression more broadly than the First Amendment, protects privacy more broadly than the Fourth Amendment. But Colorado courts have relied on these stronger and more independent protections only sparingly, not frequently. And so the scope of the independent protections of the state constitution are really undeveloped. There aren't that many cases that rely solely on Colorado law and the Colorado Constitution. And one reason is the absence of a state statute like Section 1983 that allows for lawsuits. So if a government official violates your Fourth Amendment rights, you can sue that official for damages, for money damages. Until this summer, if a police officer violated your rights under the state constitution, you had no remedy in court. You could not sue for damages. Now, however, thanks in large part to our policy team, Rebecca Wallace, Denise Myas, we have a state statute that allows people to sue for monetary damages when a local police officer or a county sheriff violates your state constitutional rights. And the state statute requires the losing defendant to pay the plaintiff's attorney's fees. And bonus, this statute expressly rejects any application of the federal judge made up of whole cloth doctrine called qualified immunity, which has functioned in the federal courts to protect violators of constitutional rights from accountability. With this new statute, lawyers in Colorado will be able to rely on the state constitution to protect and vindicate civil liberties and bring more cases to the Colorado courts based on the state constitution. And we'll be encouraging state courts to step up and protect civil liberties in the way that we used to expect the federal courts. We want state courts to be fulfilling the role that, at least during the civil rights era and afterwards, federal courts were proud. They were the protectors of civil liberties. But they're retreating from that role. We want to make state courts step up. So in our legal filings, we've already begun relying on the state constitution and state courts. For example, we've long criticized the practice of some Colorado sheriffs who, at the request of ICE, decline to release prisoners who've posted bond, completed their sentence, or otherwise resolved their criminal case. Instead, these sheriffs have relied on documents called ICE detainers to keep prisoners in custody beyond the release date so that they can be turned over to ICE. We filed a class action challenge to that practice in El Paso County in state court and relied solely on the Colorado Constitution. And the state court judge ruled that this practice of honoring detainers violated 3 provisions of the state constitution, and the court imposed a permanent injunction. Last year, again thanks to our policy team, the Colorado legislature codified the ruling from our state court case, codified it into a Colorado statute, and took what was a trial court ruling applying to one sheriff and now made it a statewide prohibition: no honoring detainers. The sheriff's appeal to our ruling was just heard earlier this week in the Colorado Court of Appeals. We're also challenging a different Colorado sheriff who has signed an agreement with ICE, an agreement known as a 287G agreement. This kind of agreement, based on a provision in federal law, purports to allow ICE to deputize these sheriff deputies and allow them to exercise the powers of federal immigration officers. So again, relying solely on state law, we are in state court arguing that this sheriff has no authority under state law to enter into such an agreement with ICE, no authority to enforce federal immigration law. And we argue that ICE authorized a Colorado sheriff to violate the state constitution or to violate the recently passed Colorado statute. Just one more example. Stephen referred to our cases that we have filed to try to protect high-risk, at-risk prisoners from COVID-19 in jails and prisons. ACLUs around the country are litigating cases to force prisons to provide greater protections to these high-risk prisoners, and even in some cases to order release. But when these cases have reached the Trump Act federal courts of appeal, the results have not been encouraging. So we have filed a case, a class action case on behalf of high-risk prisoners in the entire Colorado Department of Corrections, and we have filed it in state court in Denver, and we rely solely on the state constitution. And we're telling the state court that it needs to step up. But don't think we've abandoned federal court and federal law. Sometimes we have to go to federal court. Sometimes federal law is what we have to rely on. So we're litigating a racial profiling case against Colorado Springs on behalf of a young black man who was unlawfully stopped, handcuffed, illegally searched on the lame excuse that he matched the description. In a Freedom of Information case under the FOIA statute, we obtained a nationwide injunction forcing ICE to abandon a practice that prevented immigration lawyers from accessing information about their clients whenever ICE determined their clients to be, quote, fugitives, unquote. On behalf of Black Lives Matter 5280 and additional plaintiffs, we are suing Denver for the violent attacks on protesters that took place in late May and early June. And in another COVID-19 case, we obtained a preliminary injunction against the Weld County Jail on behalf of a class of high-risk prisoners. All this and more, we have been doing with a somewhat reduced legal staff. When COVID-19 closed our office in March, we were down 3 positions, 2 attorneys and a paralegal. Plus, Ariel Hertzberg's one-year fellowship was about to end. So we sweet-talked Ariel and got her to take one of the staff attorney jobs so that she would stay. And if we were all in person, I'd ask Ariel to stand up now, but you'll all meet her sooner or later. For the second attorney vacancy, we conducted a stealth of night raid on the staff of the ACLU of Wisconsin and hired away Asma Kadri. But she's making us wait until September 1st before she actually joins our staff. At the end of September, Annie Kurtz will join us. She has a 2-year fellowship to work on litigating issues involving the criminalization of homelessness. And we'll soon fill the vacant paralegal position. So with this beefed up legal staff, I expect we'll have most civil liberties violations in Colorado stamped out in the next year or so. So stay tuned. And in the meantime, back to Stephen.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, we'll have everything fixed in the next few months. So I'm quite sure. Okay, so I would now like to turn things over to our campaigns team to do some updates on a whole range of things that we're working on right now. And we're going to start with our immigration work with Anna Temu and Julian Camera.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm Julian Camera. I'm the field organizer here at the ACLU of Colorado. As many of you know, immigration has been a priority issue for us over the past 2+ years. Our immigration team, led by Anna Temu, who is actually one step out the door for her maternity leave, and has given me the privilege to speak tonight about the immigration campaign. In her work, She works with our legal and policy teams and our partners across the state to pass immigrant-friendly legislation and slow down a very aggressive anti-immigrant agenda. As you know, immigrants across the state and our country are experiencing some of the worst abuse our country has seen in recent years, with children and family locked in cages without legal representation and people being detained at the Geo Detention Center in Aurora, where the conditions are very inhumane and dangerous. As Stephen mentioned, this election we're working on Proposition 76, which aims to change the Colorado citizen requirement for voting. Currently, the Colorado Constitution says that every citizen can vote. Initiative 76 proposes to change the language of the Constitution to say only citizens can vote. What does this do if it's passed? By changing one word in the Constitution, we would limit voter engagement across the state due to the rippling effects of this initiative, and what it would do to our election system, where we currently have one of the best in the country. In 2019, the Colorado Votes Act was passed, which allows 17-year-olds to vote in primary elections shall they be 18 by the time of the general election. Since a citizen is defined as someone who is 18 and over, 17-year-olds would no longer be allowed to participate in those primaries, which would further disenfranchise a group of people that we are working really hard to engage in voting during these critical times. By changing every to only, we would also create unnecessary fear and confusion amongst those who are eligible voters, such as those who are naturalized citizens and new Americans, again, working to intimidate a group. They're working to intimidate a group of voters to not vote, and these are people we want to engage in our elections and who have the right to engage in our elections. Furthermore, this would implement a permanent and unnecessary limit on who can participate in local elections, such as school board and city council elections, where we have families who send their kids to school, they work, they pay taxes. Currently in Colorado, you are required to be a U.S. citizen to vote, but this would take away that option to pass city ordinances that allow people to participate in local elections. So it's very hateful and discriminatory, and it's strictly funded by out-of-state interests. So they don't even have Colorado's best interest in mind. If this passes in Colorado, we'll see it continue to pass in other states across the country. So it's imperative that we stop it here, where we act as role models for other states. It would also open the door to forcing people to prove they have citizenship and other hurdles to the ballot box, such as voter ID cards and having to provide proof of citizenship. So this election, we're working really hard for folks to vote no on 76 and help protect our democracy and accessibility to voting. So now I'll pass it off to my wonderful colleagues, Cassandra Rendon Morales and Elizabeth Hinckley.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lizzie. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Reproductive Rights Policy Council. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Proposition 115, a ballot initiative that seeks to ban later abortion in Colorado this November. Prop 115 is brought to you by the same extremists who have already tried and failed 3 times in the last 12 years to convince voters to ban abortion in Colorado. If it passes, it will criminalize abortion at 22 weeks of pregnancy with no exception for rape, incest, fetal diagnosis, or the health of the pregnant person. Make no mistake, it is unconstitutional under Roe versus Wade, but as Mark acknowledged earlier, our federal courts are now packed with judges who are hostile to abortion rights. We cannot rely on the federal judiciary to strike down Prop 115. Instead, our only option is to stop it at the ballot by voting no on 115. Now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Cass, who will talk to you about how you can help us defeat this cruel abortion ban.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Cassandra Rendon Morales, she, her, ella. I'm the Reproductive Rights Campaign Coordinator, and tonight we're asking you to do 2 things. So number 1, take out your phones, open your cameras, and scan this QR code. If you do this, it's going to take you to voteno115.com. If you can't use your phone, well, you can just go to voteno115.com. There you will be able to use your email to sign up and stay connected and receive key campaign updates. If you're more of a social media person, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Access for All Colorado, but it's just CO. Again, that's Access, number 4, All CO. Number 2, If you're interested in phone banking or texting for this campaign, all you have to do is text no bans to 33777. Again, all you have to do is text no bans to 33777. It's going to take all of us to beat this abortion ban, so sign up tonight and join us. Thank you so much for your time. Now we're going to hand it over to our next set of speakers.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Howard. I go by she, her pronouns. I am now the Racial Justice Campaign Coordinator. So, the power of the prosecutor in our criminal legal system is an issue that should make any ACLU's members' ears perk up in interest. District attorneys in particular exercise enormous influence in the system, but 70% of these elected officials run unopposed. Historically, district attorneys have wielded their power to pack our jails and prisons, interrupt the lives of defendants and their families, and deepen racial disparities. But of course, the district attorney also has the power to prosecute differently. And we know this to be true as years of nationwide polling has consistently shown strong support across the political spectrum demanding for a serious overhaul. Here at the ACLU, we understand the need for education as part of a long-term strategy to help close the gap between the 70% of these officials running unopposed to a community willing and able to hold district attorneys accountable for decarceration, sentencing, and championing real systemic change.
But we also understand that there's no time to waste and we can't wait. We need immediate action right now, and this change and this call for justice is long overdue. That's why we're so excited to launch ACLU of Colorado's Vote Your DA campaign. Our goals with this campaign are to educate and mobilize ACLU voters, A, on the function of the DA office, again, speaking to that gap that Jess was talking about, and B, to educate ACLU voters on candidates' positions on civil liberties issues. And so we're doing this through voter outreach to targeted voters in districts and also through candidate accountability, which of course I will explain. And so this 2020 election cycle, we are focusing on ACLU voters in the 1st and 18th judicial districts. And so the 1st judicial district covers Jefferson and Gilpin counties. The 18th judicial district covers Arapahoe, Douglas, Elbert, and Lincoln counties. And so you might be wondering, and I think there's about 5 or 6, last I counted, contested races for district attorneys. So why these districts? And there's actually a few reasons that have really come to an exciting head, and we're excited to do this work. For one, both Judicial District 1 and 18 have completely open seats, meaning that there's a true opportunity for change and a fresh start. Also, we've seen a lot of population growth in these areas. I mean, just think of all of Jefferson County, and then also think of Aurora, which rests in Arapahoe County. And Aurora also represents Colorado's youngest and most racially diverse county, or municipality. And so because of this density, the work done in these districts can really help set the tone and cause a ripple effect across Colorado in terms of criminal legal reform and justice. So by doing this work in these districts, we can help keep that momentum up in the courts, at the Capitol, and at the legislature after the election. Also, a very easy reason for choosing these districts is we have a lot of you all who live there. A lot of our members and activists live in these areas. And of course, our work is protecting your rights, so it's a natural fit. But let's pause here really briefly to talk about candidate accountability. We all know ACLU of Colorado is nonpartisan and doesn't do candidate endorsements. So how does this work and what does it look like? Well, it works really great. And what it looks like is working closely, our campaigns team working really closely with our policy team to collaborate on candidate forums and questionnaires, and then working to get that information out to ACLU voters who live in the districts of those candidates so they can make an informed choice for themselves. It also looks like working with our activists, that's all you, to use social media or even to attend candidate events to create opportunities to ask their candidates point blank as participatory voters in a democracy their positions on civil liberties issues. Like, will they commit to decarcerating jails through means like reforming bail and sentencing policies? And if you don't live in those aforementioned counties, maybe you zoned out, and this is where I invite you to come back in because we need you. No matter where you are in Colorado, you can join our virtual efforts to get out the vote in JD 18 and JD 1. And so this means reaching out to ACLU voters in those districts and providing with these 3 essential areas of information. 1, district attorneys' functions and candidate positions on key civil liberty issues. 2, our voter guides with our positions on priority ballot initiatives. And 3, of course, how to cast your ballot. Where's your drop box? And is it too late to mail it back? So that's this is our Vote Your DA campaign. We're so excited to have you with us for this first one, and we look forward to expanding it. And with that, I'll pass it to my fearless leader, Stephen.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you to our whole campaigns team for presenting, campaigns and policy team, excuse me. Let me be clear about that. So thank you. Okay, next up we have Rachel Pryor-Lease, who is our Director of Philanthropy. Rachel.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us tonight at our first ever virtual annual meeting. Like Stephen said, my name is Rachel Pryor-Lease. I'm the Director of Philanthropy. My pronouns are she, her, and I've been with the ACLU in various roles since May 2012. We at the ACLU of Colorado are really incredibly grateful for the support of all of our members and donors. As you all are feeling it, the past 5 months has been incredibly challenging for most people, and I really want to say a sincere thank you for continuing to give your time, energy, and of course your money to the ACLU and everything we're fighting for, especially when there are so many other things needing our attention right now, both at home and in the world at large. As Stephen said earlier, the ACLU is 100 years old this year, and thanks to all of you. We are strong, we aren't going anywhere, and no matter what happens in November, and no matter who our leaders are in the future, we will be holding everyone accountable. So in the future, I hope you can join us for our first ever virtual Bill of Rights event, which will be not this Thursday, but Thursday, October 1st at 6 p.m. We will be honoring Reverend Dr. Timothy Tyler and Dr. Nita Mosby Tyler, as well as Casa de Paz. Our keynote will be a conversation between 2 incredible activists, CeCe McDonald and our own Colorado staffer, Elizabeth Epps, founder of the Colorado Freedom Fund. You can find more details on our website at aclu-co.org. Also, please save the future date of Tuesday, December 8th for Colorado Gifts Day. And last but not least, I want to thank and introduce my 2 colleagues in my department, Jason Chavez and Susie Simmons. If you ever have any questions about your membership, your giving, any issue we're working on, please reach out to one of us. Jason there is our major gifts officer, and Susie Simmons is our incredible development coordinator and working on our Bill of Rights event. So thank you so much. And I'm here at the end to answer any questions. Now back to you, Stephen.
Thank you, Rachel. I will now pass it to Vanessa Michelle, our Director of Communications.
Hi, everybody. My name is Vanessa Michelle. I'm the Director of Communications, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. We're going to make this real quick because I know we're over on time. So Julian, let's pick up the pace. Next slide. This is my amazing communications team. I am so happy to share them with you. This is Deanna Hirsch on the left and Pablo de la Rosa Santiago on the right. Deanna does all of our media strategy, media relations, and Pablo does the video that you saw at the top and all of the amazing graphics that you'll see on our website and social media channels. Next. So these are our social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We made it easy for you by having all of the same handles for all of our channels. Follow us, and this is why. Next. breaking news. We had a question earlier, like how will you relate information about the lawsuit against the city and county of Denver? Well, the first place you'll see it is on our social media channels and on our website. So these are just a few examples of some of the social media content that we put out to break news. Next. Information, whether it's know your rights or how to vote in the state of Colorado, we will always give you the information you need on our social media channels. Next. And stories. The best way to really understand a story is to hear from someone who has experienced this firsthand. So I encourage you to go to our Facebook video library and just watch some of these amazing videos. And of course, we want to celebrate our civil liberties heroes with you, whether it's Amy Stevens or Dolores Huerta or Fannie Lou Hamer. Like, we want to celebrate these amazing people. And of course, if you're here, you probably saw this event on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. Next. And the most important thing is taking action. We will always post ways that you can take action on whether it's policy or legal or campaigns. You'll always find it on our social media channels. In fact, this summer, the Law Enforcement Integrity and Accountability Act, we had 13,000 people write messages to their legislators, and that made a huge difference. It was a huge impact that meant a lot to the legislators who were receiving these messages. And we had over 80,000 people like and share and contribute to the content that we're putting out for this Law Enforcement Integrity Act. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Denise, and she will also have some actions that you can take today.
Thank you, Vanessa. And I am the last person up, so that's part of the good news. Denise Maez, Public Policy Director, she, hers. I want to give another shout out primarily to Delana for taking the reins and doing all of this. And of course, as was mentioned earlier, to Julian for being the PowerPoint pro. I also want to say something publicly here, and that really is to thank Stephen. He has stepped in as interim director in these tumultuous times. He has provided great leadership for us at this time. Stephen, thank you very much. We appreciate you. The 2020 legislative session began on January 8th with a great deal of fanfare and really hopes for a progressive and bold agenda. We all know that that sort of hope and wish was cut short by the COVID virus, but fear not, we still went forward with what I think was a pretty successful legislative year. Every year since I started in 2012, our legislative agenda has become more bold. Last legislative session in 2019, we championed 14 affirmative pieces of legislation. 13 passed and 1 did not. At every legislative discussion afterward, I struggled with, do I start with the good news and talk about the 13 that passed, or do I start with the 1 that was left behind? Ultimately, I decided that it really did not matter because, as we have always said, if at first you do not succeed, you try and try again. That 1 bill left behind last session, incidentally, was repeal of Colorado's death penalty. And as you know, we were extremely successful in championing that legislation across the finish line this year. But as you heard earlier from Helen Griffith, that victory is not an ACLU victory. It is a victory to the many families, murder victim families, that were really the ones front up ahead, and doing the hard work. I can't thank them enough, and I'm really grateful that we decided to give them these awards this evening. I think the other important lesson we learned with the death penalty repeal bill is that sometimes justice is rarely a straight line, but rather it's a road that zigzags, meanders a little bit, and perhaps all too often goes a step or two backward. But we can be thankful on the death penalty repeal, and we can thank Governor Polis for signing that bill on March 23rd. He signed good policy. He rid of a horrific act that the state government endorsed, and he put Colorado on the right side of history. We can go to the next slide. The only thing that I wanted to highlight in this particular site is to show you the bipartisan nature of this vote. What is a little bit stark, or what may stand out, are the Democrats actually that voted no on repeal. On the Senate side, Senator Jesse Danielson, who ran as a progressive, voted no on repeal, meaning she wanted the death penalties to stay. We understand Senator Rhonda Field's position on this, and that was of no surprise. On the House side, we lost another candidate who refers to themselves as progressive, and that's Representative Breonna Tattone. We were a little surprised by Representative Kyle Mullica, and Tom Sullivan we knew also would be a likely no on this. So that's the only basis for me to show you this slide. The wonderful thing is that the bill itself was bipartisan in the state Senate, with Senator Jack Tate and Senator Julie Gonzalez running that bill. We'll go to the next slide. In September 2019, the ACLU produced a report cashing in on cruelty. And it was a close look at all of the terrible and horrific events that occur inside the privately owned immigration detention facility in Aurora, Colorado. When I visited that facility last summer, there were approximately 1,200 individuals that were detained there. They were mostly refugees or individuals seeking asylum, fleeing to the United States for not only a better life, but a safe one. Instead, they are now in the machinery of deportation. Essentially, the Trump administration cruel policies have really ramped up, as we all know, and immigration is a real big interest to this affiliate. And it is important that we do whatever we can to advance the rights of our immigrant families and friends. House Bill 1409 brings a little bit of transparency to what is an otherwise cloaked in secrecy machine. House Bill 1409 charges the Colorado Department of Health and Environment with making an annual inspection of all penal institutions. And penal institutions are defined to include facilities that hold people for civil immigration purposes. It directs CDPHE to inspect this facility before January 1, 2021, and to bring a report to the General Assembly. So much of the deportation machinery is shrouded from public view. This legislation is an important first step toward accountability. Certainly is not the last step, and we hope that we can take many more. Next slide. With bold leadership in both chambers of the Colorado legislature, we were able to champion the passage of Senate Bill 217. This bill, and I won't go through all of the bullet points here, I'll let folks go ahead and read them. But basically the bill contains a laundry list of hopes for law enforcement accountability that we had had for a very long time. And this bill makes some of those hopes a reality. Now we know that the bill is not transformative. You cannot legislate culture change, but this bill does bring to bear, or at least bring to accountability and to the light, some of the atrocities that have happened between police and their citizens. This bill is really, again, not an ACLU victory. It is a victory for the many that were out protesting. It was born of the protest against police murders of Black, Brown, and Indigenous people around the country. And we were simply lucky to be part of this bill. I want to take a big opportunity here. None of this gets done without the tremendous public policy staff that I have. And I'm very fortunate to have them. You've already met Lizzie Hinckley. She is our Reproductive Rights Counsel. You have met Helen Griffith. She is our Public Policy Associate. Rebecca Wallace is our Senior Policy Counsel, and Elizabeth Epps is our Smart Justice Organizer. If we were in person and here now, and I'm gonna actually maybe even say it regardless, please take a bow. Your efforts and your work are deserving of a bow at a minimum. So thank you very, very much. We are living through challenging and tumultuous times, but we will persevere, and not through creating greater fear, but like Martin Luther King, Congressman John Lewis, and Dolores Huerta, we will rely on the hope and aspirations of everyday people. We will continue to push our policymakers at every level to have hearts and be as bold as our passions are. And we will remember the ones otherwise forgotten, the marginalized, those experiencing homelessness, those that are displaced, our immigrant families, friends, and neighbors who work every day in our community and seek only to live out of the shadows, those that are incarcerated. And that leads me to the next slide, which is a call to action. The first confirmed case in Colorado of COVID-19, next slide, Julian, of COVID-19 was on March 6th. Our office began remote work Friday, March 13th, close of business. We need the slide up on the call to action, Julian. On Saturday, March 14th, the ACLU, along with other criminal justice reform groups, hopped on a call to talk about courts and jails and prisons. And what we know now is what we knew then, which is that prisons and jails are a virus's delight. There is no way to adhere to any of the CDC guidelines. There is no such thing as appropriate distancing. Individuals are 2, 3 to a cell. They use the same toilet. They stand in line for meals. They sit elbow to elbow. And so we have been trying to do something about the decarceration, particularly in our prisons. Our jails have been a little good, pretty successful in diminishing their population, but our prisons have not. Governor Polis has the single most authority to protect people in prison, but he has done nothing. And this is why we are planning a day of action. Our hope is that on our decarceration day of action, which is August 27th, our hope is that hundreds of people, hey, maybe even thousands, will call the governor, tag him on social media, urging him to bring our neighbors home. His response to our request that he release certain individuals from prison has been, well, I'm not going to let dangerous criminals out. Governor, no one has asked you to. And on this day of action, we are simply asking all of you to urge the governor to quite simply release individuals who are elderly, susceptible to the virus, or otherwise show that they present no safety risk to the public. It's really that simple. You could contact the governor right now. In fact, if you look at the chat, thank you, Anna, for putting that in there. You can even take a few seconds right now or a couple of minutes this evening and just contact the governor and urge him to release elderly, susceptible to the virus individuals, and those that present no risk to public safety. In this campaign, we are asking you, and perhaps more importantly, the governor, to practice and embrace forgiveness, believe in redemption, to embrace wholeheartedly that a person's worst day does not define them for life. We, of course, want to thank Governor Polis for repealing the death penalty, but we ask that he not let vulnerable Coloradans and state prisoners to otherwise die there if they, 1, present no safety risk, and 2, have a place to go. We, of course, should thank Governor Polis for signing the Law Enforcement Integrity and Accountability Bill. And while doing so on Juneteenth, he proclaimed that Black lives matter. We ask now that he show us that he means it by acting to protect brown, Black, and Indigenous lives behind bars. It's not that hard, Governor. Join us for our day of action on the 27th. We will have a webinar on the 26th. And that's all I have to say, except to tell each and every one of you, your support is what makes this work possible. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for giving me the opportunity to work for a wonderful organization like the ACLU of Colorado. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Denise, for that incredible talk about all of our work. So we now have an opportunity for Q&A, though I will say that the Q&A box does not currently have any questions in it. But so if anyone has questions, please type them into the Q&A box. And I will happily either try to answer them or pass them to my colleagues who may be better than I answering them. So does anyone have questions? Most of the ones that have been put into the, okay. I see a question from Joe who says, what is the best way to plug in for volunteer opportunities? Why don't I pass that to Delana?
I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah.
Julian and I are like, yeah.
Go for it.
And of course our boss, Delana. I'm not coming on camera because you all know what happened last time. No, I'll send, if you're interested in 2020 work specifically, I can speak to that and Julian can speak more broadly. I will send a link into the chat. It's the voting rights volunteer, but their voting rights includes not only voter protection, like getting out the information we need to vote, because confusion's what we're going to face the most. And just a friendly reminder, we have the best voting system, so we need to get that information out so people are voting, our ballot initiatives, and our DA work. So I'll send a link where you can look at many options to indicate how you're interested in getting involved in the chat right now. Thank you. And then Julian might want to talk about general volunteer opportunities.
Yeah, Joe and anyone else, please, I'll drop my email in the chat. Please feel free to reach out to me. We can talk about what you're looking to get out of volunteering and what our opportunities look like. We have a range of campaigns and issue areas that we work on, like we just went over, and we can kind of figure out what works best for you and ways to plug in. So I'll drop my email and we can go from there.
Thank you. So let me go to the next question that I see. Can we organize a peaceful protest on August 27th in Denver? Let me toss that to...
Well, Stephen, can I grab it? I know Kim. So.
Yes, thank you.
Hi, Kim. I'm so glad that you joined. So we are not organizing big protests like that because of the public health threat of COVID-19. And, we're protesting the conditions in Colorado's jails because of COVID-19 and how close everyone is. So instead, what we're doing is this great, amazing day of action. And we're partnering with really powerful, incredible organizations like the NAACP and many others in order to send emails and tweet and call and do this big push on the governor to release at-risk people. So if you visit the links that are in the chat box, you can help join us to advocate for greater decarceration. So thank you so much for asking how to get involved. You can keep emailing me with any questions or to hear about more opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. I appreciate that. There was a question about donating, which should be answered in terms of, I mean, if you want to make donations, we always welcome and need and treasure donations. You can go to our website, www.aclu-co.org. There's pretty clear links there in terms of joining, becoming a member, or donating. And I'll just do a little bit of a plug to the best way you can join or donate is to become a Guardian of Liberty, which is a membership, monthly membership donation at any amount you choose. It is the best, it is the most consistent, sustainable way of supporting us. And so I encourage you all to do that if you haven't already. Let's see. Savannah has a question about getting involved in Northern Colorado with issues on and what's happening with the Speakers Bureau. Delana or Jess, can we talk about opportunities to engage in Speakers Bureau or regional issues in Colorado?
Yeah, I can let Jess take this.
Yeah, so certainly, of course, given the pandemic and with COVID, like right now, we're probably not having a lot of virtual, we're not having in-person events in Northern Colorado, but certainly if you are interested in looking at what's happening in Northern Colorado, or if you're looking for volunteer opportunities around speaking, then definitely you can contact me and we can see. Usually it's just more of like what's trickling in terms of requests that we receive. So far we haven't had too many outside of the metro area, but certainly we'll put it out and keep folks plugged in when we do. But definitely, yeah, Savannah, you're always welcome to send me an email if you are looking for updates.
Thank you, Jess. Yes, so I see a question from someone to T. O'Banion about voter suppression is a big concern. Yes, voter suppression is a big concern for ACLUs across the country. I will say that Colorado is in one of the best positions in the country related to voter suppression. And so yes, it is a major concern for ACLUs across the country. And I can assure you that ACLU affiliates are engaging in incredible and deep ways about what to do about voter suppression and what to do about what might happen during this election. I can't talk to detail because, of course, it's all unfolding right now, but I assure you that we are deeply engaged in it across the country. So. The last question I see has to do with lockdown face masks and loss of jobs. That's a range of issues. So I don't know quite how to answer that. So there ACLU supports restrictions on sort of lockdowns and face masks and that sort of thing when it is time sensitive and very specific to public health crisis. Always monitoring those restrictions to make sure they are always appropriately tailored to the circumstances and don't go beyond what is necessary. But the ACLU does not oppose restrictions on movement or face masks when there is a public health crisis in play. But should those restrictions go beyond what is necessary during that crisis period, we will get involved. we don't feel like we have reached that point yet because of the continuing spread of COVID-19. So it's a fluid situation and we are always monitoring it. So I don't know that I see any other questions.
Carolyn put one in the chat, not Q&A.
Hi, Carolyn. We have a number of documents around voter eligibility. I think you might be asking about voter eligibility related to, I'm sorry, I'm trying to read the question. Maybe with criminal record. I think we do have information on that. We can certainly share that with you. So yes. I also see a question from Charlotta about juvenile offenders, and I'm not quite sure what that question is. If someone could join in and help me.
I think Charlotta's asking, have we done any work on getting juveniles released in the light of COVID?
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. So yes, we have a Juvenile Justice Policy Council that we work with, who has been very active working with the state and with the juvenile justice system to try to get at-risk youth moved out of juvenile detention facilities. Like Denise sort of talked about, this is one of the areas where we have been extremely disappointed in the state's response to release of juvenile offenders at risk from juvenile detention facilities. And Denise, I don't know if you want to chime in on any of it, because I'm not quite sure the details. We have been active on it. We have been disappointed with the response from the state. So.
I actually think you summarized it, but I was going to mention, Charlotta, that, there is in the chat, the letter that we sent to the governor seeking a similar depopulation of juvenile detention facilities. We have more recently heard of youth in those facilities that have tested positive. So we're making a little bit more of a serious or more aggressive, if you will, call, because it's unfortunate. Like with the prison situation, the governor has been reluctant to do a lot of big things in those areas.
Great, thank you, Denise. I see a question from Natalie that says, what kind of volunteer opportunities do you recommend for newcomers who are less outspoken but still want to help? So the first thing I would say, Natalie, is you've seen all of our social media links. They're in the chat and they were on the presentations. So sign up for all of our emails. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram. That's where we post opportunities to engage. Some of those are low lifts. It's sort of click through, send an email. You know, we make it really easy for you to just take action. That's the best way to start to get engaged. And if you want more than that, Jen, Julian, Cass, Lizzie, I mean, we have a range of folks who will be thrilled to engage you in deeper than that. But I would say, first of all, sign up for, get connected through our email and social media channels. We're a little over time, so I'm going to say this might be the last question. So I'm from Robbie. I'm on the verge of working with Aurora Mental Health Center, and part of my responsibility would be to provide resources to the homeless population. Can I be sent any additional ACLU resources on the homeless population can utilize? Denise, who can join me with that? Delana, Denise, who can?
Yeah, we have all kinds of Know Your Rights cards, and we're hoping to, with our new person starting in a few, at the end of September, I think Mark said, to really update our homeless Know Your Rights. But we have and have sent things out to lots of different community organizations. So we're happy to do that. You can go ahead and send me an email. It's dmaynes@aclu co.org, and I'll be happy to send you what we have currently, and we'll keep you in mind for resources as we develop those with our new attorney who will be working on homeless issues.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you, Delana, for mentioning that. So Robbie, I just want to mention, Mark mentioned it and Delana just mentioned it. Really timely. We had in about a month joining our staff for 2 years as an attorney working specifically on criminalization of homelessness issues. I think we all sort of wish she had been on with us for the last several months, because it is already becoming a more serious. We've been working on it for years, but it is really heightening up. So we will have, I expect we will have a lot of resources related to homelessness and criminalization of homelessness in the next few months. So, but thanks for asking. It's a critical issue and will only clearly become more critical. So, all right. Well, I don't see any other questions, and we're a little bit over time. And Delana, if you don't have anything else, I guess I want to say thank you to all of you for joining us for our first virtual ACLU of Colorado Town Hall, annual meeting. I want to thank all of my colleagues and panelists for their presentations and for answering questions. And I just want to, I guess, say thank you. And if we don't have anything else, I guess we'll sign us off. We good, Delana?
We are good. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Good night.